On today's five-star flex, we have the GOAT, Steve Wiltfong, and he's talking about Texas, Oregon, Auburn, Missouri, you name it, he's talking about it on the five-star flex. Steve, what's going on, big dog?
Good morning, Dukes. Thanks for having me on the flex.
My man, my dog, Steve. It's been a crazy year, another crazy cycle. I know you're used to it. I'm going to ask you some open-ended questions. You tell me what the pulse is. Let's start here. Steve, what school has surprised you the most with their recruiting this cycle?
Well, I don't know if surprise is the right word because it's a program that you figure can recruit at a high level year in and year out. But when you look at the Auburn Tigers sitting at number 6 nationally right now in the On3 industry rankings, they have a chance to make a run at a top 3 class with some of the names still out there on the board as they try and flip Deuce Knight. Still in it, maybe for Julian Lewis when you're talking about the quarterback position, KJ Lacey. They're going to try and get the spatula out on somebody. My On3 RPMs on Deuce Knight to Auburn right now, but you and I both know things are always fluid. Do they flip 5-star cornerback Naeem Offord, an in-state prospect from Ohio State? You know, they're battling for on 300 running back Shakai Mills-Knight. Ole Miss is considered the favorite, but Auburn's still working there. Even if he commits to Ole Miss, Auburn will continue to make Ole Miss work all the way till signing day. Andrew Babalola is a 5-star offensive tackle that Auburn looks like they're in the top 2 or 3 for. He's struggling to make a college decision when you got Stanford, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Missouri rounding out his top 5. And then speaking of Missouri, Dukes, they got a top 20 class right now, number 18 nationally under coach Eli Drinkwitz and company. When you hear me talk on the whip around or on the inside scoop with Newberg or now the 5-star flex, anytime I say resources and infrastructure, you guys know what I'm talking about. And I think that Missouri has certainly showed that they can be prominent in that arena and sit at those tables and win big-time recruiting battles like Lamont Rogers, Matt Zollers, Jack Lange. They got some of the premier players in the country in their recruiting class. They have one of the steals in the SEC, Dukes, right now. Missouri does. Jamarian Morrow, he's a running back recruit that can play in the slot, can play at wide out. Kind of reminds me of Wandell Robinson, who shined at Kentucky. Major pickup for Missouri there, Georgia, Texas A&M, some of the schools that were heavy on him. So Auburn's got a lot of infrastructure and resources this cycle. Tennessee does. My man Pete Nakos just posted a story about Georgia Tech flexing to land Josh Petty with their infrastructure and resources. It's paying off on the trail for these programs. And we're seeing these young men having to include that component into their decisions right now.
So speaking of schools that have done well already, there are some schools that some people are just waiting on to kind of really hit their stride. What school do you think can make the biggest jump from where they are to the end of this cycle?
Well, you look at a program like Miami, who's sitting at number 12, and Texas, who's sitting at number 13. Those are 2 really strong recruiting classes right now, but we've seen them be in the top 5 in the On3 industry rankings at various times. And they got some big-time players still out there. Both of them do. When you're talking about Texas, they just landed 5-star receiver Khalil Lockett, who you had on the show earlier this week. Him and his dad, Kobe. Make sure you Texas fans check out that interview if you haven't already. But Jamie French is a 5-star receiver that I think that they lead for. The number 1 athlete in the country, Michael Terry III. He's an in-state recruit. They're battling Nebraska and Oregon, but Texas certainly has solid footing there. Nick Brooks is a coveted offensive lineman that they're in the final 2 for with USC. So a lot of blue chippers still out there for Texas. And then when the season comes, Dukes, and games are played, there's some recruiting battles that they lost out on that they're going to try and circle back. Everybody's going to try and circle back on guys that they lost out on. But for proximity purposes, can Texas get DeCorian Moore on campus? Can they get Riley Pettijohn, linebacker committed to Ohio State, on campus? I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying that they're going to try. And every school is going to do that. If they missed out, if State U missed out to an out-of-state school, Naeem Offord, I'd be stunned if we didn't see him on the plains for a game this fall. I'd be very surprised if he didn't make it to a War Eagle ball game. So that's going to be the case for Texas. Texas A&M's trying to flip Riley Pettijohn as well. So And then Miami. We're going to be talking about it on Wiltfong Whip Around for Thursday's show on Wiltfong Whip Around. But if Miami goes 11-1, like my man from Fox projected, yeah, Joel Klatt picked Miami 11-1. Miami goes 11-1. Miami had a top 5 class last year, mediocre campaign. If they go 11-1 this year, the guys that they'll be able to get back in on, the DJ Pickett's, they're trying to battle Georgia for 5-star defensive lineman Elijah Griffin. There's some wideouts they'll try and flip. Miami's certainly a program that'll be fun to watch if they get off to a hot start. I kind of also the same for Florida. That first game of the year, Florida versus Miami Dukes, that's going to be fantastic. A lot of recruiting implications for that ball game. All the premier players in the Sunshine State are expected. I think they'll have a lot of guys committed elsewhere in the stands. Ty Jackson, number 1 linebacker in the country per On3, will be in the stands. He likes Miami. He likes Florida State. He likes Florida. Alabama's in there as well. And then that's a tone-setting game for 2026 and beyond, particularly for Florida and Billy Napier and company. They can get some of the people dragging them, saying Coach Nape's not going to be there. There's a lot of confidence around that Florida program right now. It's quiet. It's internal. It's in Gainesville, but they feel like they're building that program the right way. They had to flip an entire culture, Dukes. When Coach Napier got into Gainesville, it was a program that lacked toughness, and it is a program that lacked discipline, and it was a program that lacked playmakers. I think they've done a good job going out there getting playmakers. They got one of the most veteran quarterbacks in the country under center. Then they got one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country pushing him in that quarterback room every day. But I think that they like the foundation, what they've done around the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. So it's a put-up year for Florida in today's landscape of college football. Probably that way, maybe even a little bit out west for USC as well. But Florida with a huge opportunity in week 1 against Miami to set the tone for the season. But same goes for the Hurricanes to get a huge road win against an SEC in-state opponent as they try and win the ACC this year, get to the college football playoff and start restoring glory to that program that was so great when we were kids, Dukes, down there in Miami.
So, Steve, in that last answer, I heard you mention Khalid Lockett. I heard you mention Texas also trying to get Jamie French, possibly getting the more. I'm thinking about that wide receiver room. I want to talk about who do you think has the strongest position group committed so far?
Well, you talk about Alabama, that number 2 ranked recruiting class right now, Dukes. You look at what they've done on the offensive line right now. That's a special group with Ty Haywood, 6'5", 300-pound offensive tackle from Denton Ryan. That is a program that has a lot of discipline. He's going to come into Alabama with the right work ethic, and we love him. Obviously, he's a 5-star recruit. Jackson Lloyd, one of the top players in California, 3-sport athlete that shines in basketball and baseball. And then you have Michael Carroll, the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the country per the On3 player rankings. This is a special offensive line class that Alabama is putting together this cycle. I don't want to leave off Mal Waldrop, who's an in-state recruit that they beat Clemson on. So Crimson Tide, Micah DeBose, they beat LSU on. So 5 offensive linemen in the fold for Alabama. Nobody recruiting the position better this cycle. Notre Dame's got a really good group headlined by Will Black. If Tennessee can land David Sanders this weekend, you pair him with Douglas Utu and Nick Brooks. That's a championship caliber combination. But Alabama's offensive line class, if you're asking me who's recruited what position the best and you stack it all up pound for pound, that offensive line class is where I'm starting first.
I love to hear it. So when we talk about
guys, you love to hear it.
I love to hear it, Steve. Reason being,
you love to hear about Alabama's offensive line class, there, Dukes.
I think it's cool because
Dukes went to Auburn. That's why I'm busting his balls a little bit.
Thinking about what Kalen DeBoer has been able to do, and how it will affect the Iron Bowl with the guy recruiting against a guy like Hugh Freeze, who essentially had to flip the culture in Auburn. Hearing that Alabama is recruiting at that clip, that lets me know that Hugh Freeze is going to be busted. He's going to be busting his tail to get right behind him. So in a roundabout way, I like it. All right, here we go. I want to ask you something else about a specific player. What player do you think? Now, we all know the 5 stars are expected to come in and make an impact. What player do you think that's not a 5-star that has a chance in this class to make an impact as a true freshman?
All right, and just so you guys listening at home, I didn't get a cheat sheet beforehand, so I'm kind of scanning our player rankings right now as Duke's asked it. It's a loaded question. There's so many great players, but you're talking about an instant impact type player that's not a 5-star. I think I start with Vernell Brown III out of Orlando Jones. He's committed to Florida, 5'10.5", 175 pounds. He's a major problem on the high school level in all three facets of the game. I think he brings instant playmaking ability to the Gators, someone that they can use in the slot, but certainly line up all over. They can get creative with them, jet sweep. He's super smart. He's wired the right way. He can make people miss. He's strong. He's got elite hands, can win one-on-one balls, can also create separation. I think he's got a college skill set already. I expect Vernell Brown III to be instant impact in Gainesville and have a hell of a career.
Steve, I got to ask you this. Oregon is in the Pacific Northwest, but they recruit any and everybody they want. How are they being so successful recruiting with a national imprint?
Well, I think it's a lot of reasons, right? First, you can't recruit at a high level without resources and infrastructure. Oregon's got that going for them. But that can't be the only thing you got going for you on the trail to win these elite recruiting battles. Dan Lanning and his track record at Georgia prior to Oregon. He was one of the top recruiters in the country as an assistant coach at Georgia, helping land guys like Malachi Starks. He's very involved in the recruitment of Oregon's top prospects. They all have a relationship with the head football coach. Guys like Tosh Lupoy on staff. He's got an elite group of assistant coach recruiters as well. But guys that have also helped churn out some of the best players in college football, high draft picks. They're doing that at Oregon. They've been right on the cusp of the college football playoff twice. So I think, and then I think they're tactful. I think they know when to turn up the heat on prospects, when to lie in the weeds. And so I think when you add it all up, you see why Oregon's being very successful. No one's doing the transfer portal better than them. Certainly they've done the best job at quarterback, but they've landed some key players at wide receiver on the defensive line and in the secondary. So when you do that, that's a recipe for big time winning. Guys like Birch and Evan Stewart and so on and so forth. Again, I just think they're well organized. Marcel Malchow, their general manager, he is one of the best in the game. He is one of the reasons why that profession is now getting highly paid. He paid his dues working for guys like Nick Saban. Marcel Malchow worked for Nick Saban and Chris Peterson and Kirby Smart. So those are three of the best head coaches in the country. And now he's with Dan Lanning. And so I think those two together is a lethal combination. So again, people are always like resources, infrastructure. Yeah, but they're recruiting against programs that have that also. I think Oregon's authentic. I think they can point to real things, player development, being right there to win games. They're getting a lot of support from the administration, certainly Phil Knight. Easy to see why Oregon's so successful. Oregon and Washington have been more successful than USC. I mean, over our lifetimes, Duke, USC is obviously like that big brand out west that you think of. But when you're talking about college football playoff appearances and playing in big bowl games at the end of the year, Oregon and Washington have been more successful. That's why USC brought Lincoln Riley and his three playoff appearances out there. Lincoln Riley hired a hell of a defensive staff. So I'm so intrigued by what they're going to be like this year, because this is also one of the first times in a long time you look at a Lincoln Riley team and say he doesn't have a Heisman candidate at quarterback. Are we talking about Miller Moss in the Heisman later in the year?
Steve Wiltfong, you've been doing this a long time. College football, NCAA 25 has taken the world by storm. Who does Steve not who. What position does Steve Wiltfong play on Road to Glory?
So it's kind of funny you asked me this question, because I don't know if you saw, I had a tweet before the season saying, where do all these adults feel like they're going to have the time to play this game like they used to play this game? And I meant no disrespect. I didn't expect it to go viral, but it went wild. But you know what? A lot of people proved my point, because some people were talking about the vacations they took. There were some funny tweets about how people quit their jobs. Like, people can spend their time however they want to spend their downtime. For me personally, I stopped with the vids in the early 20s, But my kids have the game. And, one of my 7-year-olds running a dynasty, he went 11-1 and got left out of the playoff, lost his last game.
No. Oh, man.
Got left out of the playoff. And he was ranked 11th after he lost his last game and got left out of the playoff. And I felt like the game screwed him. So, look, he's 7. Not much adversity for my 7-year-old. But imagine being 7, going 11-0. Losing your last game. He didn't hit the reset button like we used to because he thought he was guaranteed I'm in the playoff. I mean, and then to find out he was in the Music City Bowl against Wake Forest. So he couldn't believe it. He was stunned.
What team was he?
He's 7. So then we went and looked at who was in the playoff. He's like, how's Oregon in the playoff over me? They lost 3 games, and he's 7. And then my 10-year-old, he's got himself as a quarterback doing Road to Glory. Every once in a while, I jump in and just play some exhibition games with them. And I just like seeing the stadium atmospheres on that game and how realistic they did a good job with that. I do find the recruiting a little funny with the names and what they make the young men look like and stuff on the game. But Road to Glory, if you're asking me what I would do if I could, I mean, obviously you got to be a quarterback and you got to, you got to be the guy that touches the ball every play, right?
Right. Steve, are you a dual threat or are you a pocket guy?
Well, dual threat, because that's what the NFL game has gone to now, right? There's not too many statues getting drafted high anymore. That's why I think when you look at the rankings and Charles Power and Cody Belair leading that for us, you're looking for quarterbacks that can create and extend plays and deal with messy pockets and make things happen, because that's what the NFL game is like nowadays. But you want to be able to run on the game. You want to be elusive and get away. But I love the game. I think I was misconstrued with that tweet, and we have it. We got it the first week. We're playing it here. But I certainly wasn't going to get back on social media and fight that fight. So I'm glad that you gave me a chance to explain myself there. I'm happy it's back. I'm happy people are playing it. My kids are playing it. I'm actually happy that my kid missed the playoffs a little bit just so he can learn that life's not easy. Now he's got to go back in there, play year 2. It's doing the recruiting for him. He's not doing the recruiting. So it's on the computer's recruiting for him. So
what team did he choose?
He chose the Irish. We live in Indiana. So his grandparents live up in South Bend.
Okay.
Dukes, my first job was at the South Bend Tribune back in August 2000, answering the phone. So we got some ties up there. So
wow.
He's the Irish.
All right. Steve Wiltfong, man, it's always fun. First time we got to do it in front of everybody else. What show should we be looking for next?
Well, you got to like and subscribe to this On 3 Recruits channel so you can get the 5-star flex. You can get the Wiltfong whip around. You can get the inside scoop with Josh Newberg. You can get the biggest commitments in high school football. You're alerted to everything on this channel. So make sure you hit like and subscribe. Dukes, thanks for having me on the 5-star flex. Look forward to getting back on with you at some point. Keep killing it. You guys take care.